Welcome to Long Live Alternative Party's podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on our podcast. His name is Roger Roots, and he's with the Libertarian Party. In a second, he's going to tell you which office in particular he's running for. So welcome to the podcast, Roger.
Yeah, hello. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Please start by telling us what office you're running for.
Well, I'm running for Clerk of the Montana State Supreme Court.
Okay, that sounds interesting. We can talk in more detail about that in a moment. If you could also tell us a brief background of your life, who you are.
Yeah, well, I call myself a hardcore libertarian. I have quite a background. I am an attorney, and I do lots of mostly federal criminal cases. Right now I'm working on a lot of January 6th defense cases. I'm also representing Joe Exotic, the famous Tiger King case. And I have previously worked on the Bundy cases in Oregon and Nevada. And I'm a longtime libertarian. Also, I've dabbled in teaching at the college level here and there. So I have quite a background.
Okay. So because you're a libertarian, you're supporting people in your career, your law career, who may not be libertarians. They may have different views than yours, but you want to preserve their rights as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Most of them have constitutional or libertarian type issues in their cases, even if they themselves might be some other type of perspective.
Okay, makes sense, because I heard January 6th, and when I think January 6th, I don't think a lot of libertarians were involved in that. So that's good that you're able to see beyond your own team and you're willing to fight for the rights of everyone, whether you agree with everything they say or not.
Yeah, in fact, the January 6th defendants frequently have First Amendment issues. They are being over prosecuted. Many of them are being over sentenced. And, a lot of them are, I would describe as conservatives, very pro-police, at least before January 6th. I think now they've learned their lesson. Now they're being prosecuted by the state. And so, same with Joe Exotic, really. Although he is actually a libertarian-oriented person.
Oh, okay. All right, that sounds good. So the clerk of the state Supreme Court, I don't think we have any office in our area that's equivalent to that, and it may not be in other areas if I'm not mistaken. So would you please tell our audience what the roles and responsibilities of that position is, please?
Yeah, well, in Montana, the clerk of the state Supreme Court office is partisan. It is a partisan race. So you have Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians running for the position. In most states, the clerk of the court is deemed to be sort of a nonpartisan role, even if it's elected. Some places it's not even an elected position. But where it is an elected position, in most states, it's nonpartisan.
Okay.
Let me just say, obviously, the clerk plays the role of, filing the legal papers, notifying parties, notifying attorneys, notifying the judges about the proceedings, scheduling. Those are things that the clerk of the state Supreme Court does. Issuing and certifying the judgments and the rulings and the rulings of the judges and things.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's ironic because in Montana, one very important point is that in Montana we retain our Libertarian Party ballot status every year by winning enough of a percentage of the statewide vote to qualify for the next election. Otherwise, if we fail to get a proper percentage, I think it's generally above 3% in a particular race usually. If we don't get that in a statewide race, then the next election we need to go out and gather signatures, which is a lot of work and a lot of time and money. And one reason I am running is to preserve the ballot access of the Libertarian Party for next election.
Okay. So it sounds like the clerk of the Supreme Court is similar to clerks of courts in smaller areas in a regional or county sense. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's very similar.
Okay.
Of course, obviously, the Montana Supreme Court is an appellate court. There are no trials.
Oh, okay.
But in a lot of, at the lower level, the clerk can also participate in the trials and things. And of course,
Okay.
the Supreme Court of Montana is an appellate court.
Okay. So how are you planning on implementing your libertarian vision for this position?
Well, that's a good question. I'll just say that I'm obviously, one big part of libertarianism is fundamental individual liberties. Of course, I would perform my office duties in line with that, and in light of my overarching libertarian philosophy, which is to protect the individual rights of all the players and the litigants that come before the Supreme Court. And so the clerk actually should be very independent of the judges. I think one problem in a lot of courts is that the clerk becomes subservient or subordinate to the judges. Now,
Sure.
I'll just say I am a lawyer myself, and I think I'm very I'm a big legal historian and a legal researcher, so I will not be bullied by the judges, and of course I would act as a check on the judges when necessary to do so.
Oh, that's good. So are the clerks usually lawyers, or is that uncommon for them to be lawyers?
I actually don't know, but I'd say it's probably uncommon.
Okay. So they're more of the when the Democrats and Republicans run candidates for that office, it's more party hacks that they're putting in the position.
Yeah, it's frequently a placeholder position for someone in a party that wants to later maybe seek other offices.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good then, that you want to change the way that office is being run and you want to make it independent.
Well, it's supposed to be independent to an extent. In other words, the clerk should always recognize that his or her position is designed by the state constitution to act as an independent check, on the court and the other players.
Okay. So specifically, what types of things would they check the judges on?
Let me think about this. Well, one example comes to mind, which is the fact that many courts will mistreat pro se litigants. That happens
yes.
a lot.
Yes.
Litigants that come before the court that are not represented by lawyers. The judges often don't treat them very well, and sometimes, issue very perfunctory rulings and sort of treat them as second-class litigants. So that's just one thing that comes to my mind, is I would certainly protect every participant, including pro se litigants.
Oh, that's great. I've been pro se a few times myself, so I understand what you're talking about. So that's great that you're being advocate for that. And I understand sometimes people feel threatened by that, they say, so I'm glad that you as a lawyer don't feel threatened by pro se defendants.
Yeah. Oh no, I love pro se litigants. In fact, often they have more courage to really make the challenges that need to be made than lawyers do.
Wow. That's a great way to put it. So
Yeah.
sometimes on our podcasts, our candidates don't want to talk about their opponents, and sometimes candidates do. So would you care to talk about your opponents, what they're like?
I'll just say that, this is in Montana, this is not an extreme policy making position. Obviously the clerk has no role in creating policy or legislation or implementing, any policy changes really. So the duties of the clerk are just to perform the duties and file the papers and the judgments and report and notify and whatnot. I don't honestly have a real criticism of my opponents. I'm sure
Okay.
they are, professional in their own way.
Okay. That's fine. That sounds all right. So how are you reaching the voters for this race? How are you getting the word out about your candidacy?
I will say I have sort of a track record in Montana. I've been on the ballot as a Libertarian candidate for different offices, probably for 10 years, virtually every election.
Oh wow.
And so I think I am known, and from that I think one obviously we're a third party, so we don't always win these races, but one of our purposes is to educate people about the evils of government and overreaching government. And so that's one thing I always do is whenever I get an opportunity to speak or a podcast or an interview like this one, for example, I always try to advocate for libertarian principles and talk about the I guess the best government is the least government. I constantly try to just use the race to educate people about the evils of government. The government does so many things so badly. And so that's one overarching theme. And so in some ways, even if I don't win the race, I hope to reach people who might not have heard about libertarian ideas. And I hope to, try to educate them that basically the world could be run much, much better without so much government.
Oh sure. So you're telling us that most of the time people who are in this position are not lawyers, and in many states, similarly, the justices of the court have to be lawyers. So do you think that's a good requirement, or do you think that's going too far? Do you think judges should have to be lawyers, or do you think because it's a democratic system, we have the right to elect whoever we want?
I advocate that there should not be any requirements. The people, the voters really, should be able to vote for and determine in their own minds whether someone's qualified. They shouldn't need to be lawyers. And by the way, when you look back in history, in American history, the state Supreme Courts of many states used to have farmers and bootmakers and construction workers on their courts as judges. And obviously they would be very knowledgeable. Many of they say that the one of the most common books, I think the third or fourth most common books among the households of early Americans was Blackstone's commentaries on the law.
Wow.
There was the Bible and but one of the most common books in people's homes in the 1700s in the colony was Blackstone's commentaries and other legal books. The American founders were that generation were very knowledgeable. The common person was legally knowledgeable, much more than today.
Oh wow, yeah, sure. Wow, that's amazing. That's great. That's great. So how about jury nullification? Do you support that, or do you think it's not something that's good?
Well, let me just say I absolutely support what most people call jury nullification. It's funny, I don't use that phrase as much. To me, it's not nullification. It's more like the jury being independent and fully informed.
Oh, okay.
And it is the understanding that the juries in our system are supposed to be a check on government. And even if the government proves its case beyond a reasonable doubt, the jury has the absolute fundamental right to find anyone not guilty at any time for any reason. And the purpose of the jury system is to be a check on tyranny and to stop tyranny. And yes. So you can call it jury nullification, but it really is the jury being fully informed that it has the power and the right to find anyone not guilty for any reason.
For any reason.
Yeah, for absolutely any reason. Let's put it this way. We all know that governments can become tyrants. And so if a tyrannical prosecutor is using using a law that's on the books to destroy people's lives or to enslave people or whatever, it doesn't matter if some government agency has said the law is fine or if if a judge has said that law is even is constitutional. The jurors actually have the power to stop that kind of tyranny and say, no, doesn't matter if a judge once said it was constitutional.
Sure.
I'm going to say as a juror that it is not. It violates fundamental principles of justice.
Sure. So how do jurors get that across to other jurors without getting in too much trouble during cases? If they want to make someone not guilty, not based on the facts, but on the law in question.
Well, let's put it this way. During jury selection, I often tell people, a lot of people don't even like being on juries, but
Sure.
being on a jury is one of the few opportunities people have to act as a check on their government. And
Yep.
so, I tell people someone is counting on you. When you get summoned for jury duty, there is somebody who is counting on you to protect him or her,
Yep.
potentially in a proper situation from the government. And, obviously, I mean, there are true criminals. There are dangerous people out. Obviously, not everyone is innocent, but there are times when a juror, really needs to act to protect his fellow individuals from government. And, I tell people somebody's counting on you. And when, one thing that the jurors really should just keep concentrating on is constantly telling they'll be fair. They'll be fair to all sides, and that's the best way. They'll be fair to all sides. And, then, if it's a criminal case, well, then the prosecutor and the defense attorney, generally speaking will, appreciate such a juror, and that juror will get on, and then, a juror can then inform his fellow jurors about the true principles and the reason for the right to trial by jury.
Okay. That's good. Sounds good. So do you think more libertarians should enter the legal field and become lawyers?
That's a great question. I wish more libertarians would make their way to being judges, which is a long process. I hate to say it, but the people, the way that lawyers are trained and created is so bad that it really, it really does. It almost filters out libertarians because the law school process filters out people who've ever had any brushes with the law, and it filters out people who don't like the government, generally speaking. So the law schools are filled with government trusting students, and then they become lawyers, and then the worst of all of them become judges.
Wow.
And so the judges, unfortunately, generally are the worst and most government trusting people in the society. It's very terrible. So I wish there was a way to stop this process and make it, I would say, more liberalized and because the common person, let's say, let's just face it, that the average American does not trust government as much as the lawyers do. And so that whole process of screening out people, especially screening out anti-government people, is terrible. And I really would like to see that change so that people with anti-government orientations can become, a judge on the U.S. Supreme Court, for example.
Yeah, that we like that much better than what we have right now in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Roger, how can our audience support you in your campaign?
Well, I do. Let me say, I have a website. It's not probably up to date, rogerroots.com.
Okay.
I'm not really updating it like I should. I've got to get on that. They can call me at my number. I really do like to have opportunities to speak, especially like where I get more than 10 minutes,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but of course now we're closing in toward the election day is upon us, just in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So, one thing about it is I view myself as a libertarian activist, and I'm just one out of many. And you know, all of us, the Libertarian Party in general, is always constantly trying to raise our share of the vote totals. And you know, and I'm not sure we always succeed, but I'd like to see the Libertarian Party, you know, become a bigger and bigger player in American politics.
Sure. Yeah, that would be great. We definitely want more of a role for the Libertarian Party with the other alternative parties. We want
Yeah.
the system to change.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good. So we're recording this podcast in the middle of October, so you're right, there's not much time left in the campaign. We got about 3 weeks.
Yep.
Does Montana have early voting?
Montana has early voting, and it has already begun. So people are already doing the absentee voting right now. Yeah.
Oh my, do you like that? Do you like early voting, or do you wish it wasn't there?
That is a good question. I will say that in general speaking, I'm very leery. I'm very concerned about the integrity of elections. So I believe that it should be very easy to vote, but it should also be almost impossible to cheat. So,
sure.
So I believe it should be very easy for each person to get exactly one vote, but not 2 votes, not 3 votes, And so, I actually think that same day voting is a better system. Or let's say 1 week voting, 2-day voting. I think that would be better than the system we have now.
Okay, interesting. So you think the early voting makes there's more room for irregular activity and cheating and fraud and things like that?
Yes, yeah. The law, because when these elections are turned into 1 month, month-long affairs, there's more availability for cheaters to rig it and game it and, monitor who's voting and who is not, and then, create fake ballots and, whatnot. So I think same-day voting actually is much more better for integrity.
Okay. That sounds good. So, Roger, we thank you for coming on the podcast today, and we wish you all the best of luck in your campaign and everything else you do in your personal and professional life.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
All right, take care and all the best.
Okay, you too. Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.